Key 5. Understanding the basic principle behind all life. Let me take you on a journey into the heart of the Elohim, that you may gain an understanding of who the Elohim are and how they looked at their task of creating planet Earth. The first thing you need to consider is the difference between the state of consciousness of most human beings on Earth and the consciousness of the beings I call the Elohim. You may look at planet Earth and see some of the manifestations of selfishness and self-centeredness that can be found virtually anywhere on this planet. As a spiritual person, you might very well have seen these manifestations your entire life, and you might have realized that this simply cannot be the full potential of human beings. There must be something more. There must be something higher. And what you really sensed in the inner levels of your heart, in the innermost recesses of your being, is indeed that it is possible to rise above the state of consciousness that is so blinded by selfishness and the lower desires that are almost animalistic desires, insatiable desires. For you can never have enough of this or that or the next thing. And so the reason why you are open to this book, open to the spiritual side of life, is that you carry with you from past lifetimes an understanding, a knowledge, an inner knowing that there is a higher potential for human beings. It is possible to rise above this state of selfishness, of spiritual blindness, and come to truly understand what life is, how life works, and how the ultimate and ultimately benign Creator created the world of form. It is possible to understand the principles and the vision that the Creator had before it made the first impulse towards actually manifesting the world of form. And when you do come into the oneness of this understanding, then you have escaped the human, the self-centered, the animalistic, the carnal. You have therefore risen to a state of consciousness where you are not really an individual being, as most human beings look at this today. You realize the underlying truth behind the old statement that no man is an island. And of course, that is equally true for any woman. You realize that beneath the seeming differences and divisions found on earth, there is an underlying oneness, an underlying unifying principle that ties all life together in this giant web of life. And when you do, indeed, reach the level of consciousness of the Elohim, you have not only understood this underlying oneness as a theoretical or intellectual concept, you have risen to a state of consciousness where you have become one with that unifying consciousness, that unifying principle that ties all life together in this giant web, which we might call the Antakarana of life. The Elohim, then, are beings who are beyond all selfishness. They are so far beyond what you see expressed today on planet Earth that most human beings would not be able to fathom the consciousness of the Elohim, nor would they be able to withstand being in the presence of the Elohim. For the consciousness of the Elohim has become the open door for the light from a higher sphere, and therefore the light in their beings is so intense that few people can even stand to be in their presence. And thus, although the Elohim are not able, as I have explained, to bring forth enough light to be the driving force behind creating a solar system, for beings of an even higher level of awareness need to do this. The Elohim are still the open doors for bringing forth the vision and the driving force in their own beings in order to superimpose that vision upon the light provided by the beings in the sun. Thus, the Elohim have come into such a oneness with the creative principles that are defined for this particular sphere that there is not even a question of whether they will follow them or not. This does not mean that the Elohim have given up free will. It means that they have given up a separate will. For truly, what most people on earth see as free will is not truly a free will. For it is a will that is based on the illusion of separation, the illusion that makes people think that they are separate beings and that they can do whatever they want to others without affecting themselves. Do you perhaps begin to sense that if there truly is an underlying oneness to all life, then this belief in separation is a complete illusion? If all life is interconnected, then you are never an island. Even though you may see yourself as an individual being here on earth, you are still not a separate being. You may think based on your observation or experience with life on earth that you can do certain things that affect other people, but if those things never come back to you here on earth, then you might think you have gotten away with this. You might think you have managed to do something to other people, and yet it had no consequences for yourself. This, of course, is indeed one of the greatest of all illusions found on earth. And it is precisely the same illusion that has caused all of the burdens on the body of the Earth Mother. Just look back a few decades at how there was a consciousness in the Western world that was completely unwilling to recognize the phenomenon of pollution and the possibility that letting out certain toxins in nature would one day have profound effects upon human beings, even upon the entire human population. Can you see that the entire attitude towards pollution that was rampant up until the 1960s and beyond is indeed based on this basic illusion that human beings are separate beings, and that human beings, therefore, as a race, are separated from the planet upon which they live. Human beings are separated from nature. We live in here, in our big cities. Nature is somewhere out there. And what we let slip into the water and the air from our big cities will only affect nature out there. Or maybe it will have no effect at all on nature, but it certainly will not come back to haunt us one day. We can get away with polluting all we want without it ever coming back to hurt us. Do you see that this very consciousness was indeed the foundation for all of the environmental problems that you currently see on this planet? Do you then see that if there is ever to be any real progress in transcending environmental problems, it is absolutely necessary that humankind as a whole will overcome this illusion of separation? Yet this process of overcoming the illusion of separation must start somewhere, and it must start with individuals. First with one individual, you, and then with other individuals, until gradually a critical mass has been built. Do you see, my beloved, that this was exactly what happened during the 1960s and beyond, when first a few people started becoming aware of a potential impact of pollution upon the human race? And now, even the governments and the media and big industrialists could no longer ignore the need to change the attitude, the behavior, and the policy towards pollution. Yet do you see that truly solving environmental problems will not be done by simply enacting laws that restrict the behavior of people or corporations? If the underlying problem is indeed the sense of separation, well then, a true breakthrough will not happen until that sense of separation has been challenged completely. And therefore, more human beings must begin to understand and uncover the underlying principles that the Creator defined when it decided to create the sphere in which you live, when the Creator decided to create the world of form. These are the underlying principles behind every sphere that has ever come into being, and it is what we might call the alpha aspect of the laws of God. There is, however, also an omega aspect, which is a set of principles that were designed by the beings who brought forth the creative impetus for your particular sphere. These omega principles, what we might call the laws of nature or the laws of physics, are of course not in any way separated from or in opposition to the alpha principles of God's law. They are simply the extensions of these principles, but given a specific form in order to bring forth the sphere in which you live, with its particular characteristics. Again, the Elohim were in complete oneness with both the Alpha of the Creator's laws and the Omega of the principles of those who define the design for your particular sphere. The Elohim then are working from within your sphere to create solar systems and even organize them at the higher levels of the Elohim into entire galaxies, and then at an even higher level of consciousness in the sphere that has ascended most recently. You have beings who organize even the galaxies into one coherent system that moves in unison like the players in a giant symphony that all play to the same music. And thus there is harmony between all levels of the whole, and that is precisely why the whole carries such beauty. Look at the beauty of the night sky and realize that were it not for the fact that there are beings with a higher level of consciousness than human beings that have created this beauty, well then, none of this could even exist. For the universe itself would long ago have self-destructed, or it would never even have gotten started. You see, my beloved, there is one unifying principle that underlies all creation, that underlies the entire world of form. It is a principle that can be described in many ways, and has indeed been described in various ways through various religious or spiritual or esoteric teachings. Yet, given that I have started out by talking about the discoveries of modern science, let me once again use science as the metaphor for describing this principle. Once again, as I said in my remarks about the first law of thermodynamics, it is necessary to realize that this principle was discovered at a time when science was in its much more primitive state than today. This refers both to the philosophy of science and to the actual instruments that scientists use to make their measurements. As a result of this, scientists formulated what is generally called the second law of thermodynamics. This law states that in a closed system, disorder will increase until the system reaches the lowest possible energy state, where there is no difference in temperature, where there are consequently no organized structures possible. As an example of the kind of closed system that is talked about in the second law of thermodynamics, take a bathtub filled with water. Now apply force to that water by moving your hand back and forth until you create waves in the bathtub. Then remove your hand and watch as the now closed system of the bathtub relatively quickly finds its way towards an equilibrium, where the water is no longer moving, for it has reached its lowest possible energy state. This is a very simple demonstration of the principle discovered in the second law of thermodynamics. Of course, with the current knowledge of science itself, it is obvious, or at least it should be obvious to most scientists, that the second law of thermodynamics has certain limitations. For given that scientists today know that everything is energy, that everything is vibrations, and that everything is interconnected, then it should be obvious that there truly is no closed system. There is no system that can be entirely closed. It is simply not possible to create one system anywhere in the material universe and say that this system is completely isolated from the rest of the universe. You may look at the immense space between various galaxies, or between solar systems, or even between the Earth and the Sun, and you might think that it is possible for somebody in this universe to be isolated. But you know that your Earth is affected by the gravity of the Sun, receives rays from the Sun, and even receives so-called cosmic rays that come from far beyond the Sun. You know that your Sun moves in a larger system called a galaxy, and you know that even your galaxy moves as part of the entirety of the universe. And thus you see there can be no truly closed system. This is a concept that I will return to later. But for now, what I want to focus on is that regardless of the fact that there is no truly closed system, the second law of thermodynamics is based on the discovery of a true principle, namely the one underlying principle behind the world of form. You see, in the very beginning, before there was any world of form, there was only the Creator. When I say only, of course this is somewhat of a misnomer, for the Creator is allness. The Creator is a state of consciousness far beyond the Elohim, so far beyond that there is no point in even using words to try to describe it. Yet the consciousness of the Creator can be experienced. Even human beings can have a glimpse of that experience. And thus, when only the Creator existed, when there was no form, what drove the Creator to create form was indeed the very principle discovered in the second law of thermodynamics. That principle might be expressed more poetically as love, but a love that is beyond human possessive love, and is truly unconditional love that never accepts any conditions as finite or ultimate. Thus, here you have a Creator which is completely self-sufficient, which is complete and whole in itself. What would drive such a being to create a world of form and invest its own being in that form? Well, it is the very principle that even brought the Creator into existence, namely that of self-transcendence, continual and perpetual self-transcendence, the transcendence into a higher state. What I have called love could also be called the drive to be more, and even the Creator is an expression of the drive to be more. And thus, as an expression of that drive, the Creator desired to be more. And how does a complete and whole self-sufficient Creator become more? Well, the Creator becomes more by creating a world of form out of itself, by sending extensions of itself, localized extensions of itself, into that world, so that they might become more by interacting with the world of form. And thus, in the process of the extensions of the Creator becoming more, then the Creator itself becomes more. You see, this is the most fundamental principle behind all form. And it has been described in the second law of thermodynamics precisely by saying that there is always a drive to become more. And if this drive is suspended, then things must self-destruct. Even though there strictly is no closed system, we can reformulate the second law of thermodynamics by saying that if a particular system or unit in the world of form is not in the process of transcending itself, then that system or unit will go into the opposite direction and self-destruct. It will go towards a lower and lower state of energy and organization and sophistication until it can no longer maintain any existence in the world of form. So we might say that the second law of thermodynamics makes it clear that nothing can stand still. There is no such thing as still stand. Anything in the world of form must be either transcending itself and becoming more, or it must be self-destructing and becoming less. There is nothing in between. It may seem, I am aware, that there is something in between. But this is an illusion created by a particular aspect of the human mind called the ego, and we will later talk about it in greater detail. Yet the underlying principle discovered in the second law of thermodynamics is precisely that nothing can stand still, nothing can remain the same. However, we can even go to a deeper level in our understanding of the second law of thermodynamics. For what is it that makes something self-transcend, the absence of which makes it self-destruct? Well, it is indeed that there must be a driving force, that nothing can exist as form unless there is a driving force that creates that form, that sets it apart from the lowest possible energy state, and that continues to keep it apart for as long as it exists. So you see then that for anything to exist, for anything to continue to exist, it must be in tune with, it must be flowing with, this driving force behind the entire world of form. This driving force can be conceived of as a flow of energy, although not energy as you understand it in a physical, material sense. Therefore, I would like to call it the river of life, which is a metaphor meant to illustrate that the entire material universe can be seen as one giant river. If you picture in your mind the immensity of the Amazon River, not only near the ocean where it is wide, but even in the smallest areas of the jungle, where it begins as small creeks and streams, if you look at this entire river, you can conceive of it as one giant system that is moving in unison. As the water near the ocean flows into the ocean, it creates a space, and the water behind it flows into it, and so on and so forth, until the very farthest drop in the mountains is now affected and flows into the space created by the drop before it. As another example, you might picture the entire universe where all of the galaxies, according to modern science, are constantly expanding away from each other, and this then might also be seen as a river. Although it does not flow in a linear fashion, it flows in a spherical fashion, expanding outwards, 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 ever transcending itself and becoming more in the process. So my point is that even beyond the material universe, into other spheres, there is this giant driving force, the river of life. And the Elohim, of course, are completely one with that river. They flow with it. They allow the river to express itself through their beings, and as they then become the open doors for the river to flow, then they also become the directors of the river over their area of influence. It is not that when you unify your being with the river of life that you lose individuality or self-awareness. On the contrary, your individuality, your self-awareness is expanded. And then as you direct the river of life and see the consequences of how you direct it, then your self-awareness is expanded even more. And thus you become more by flowing with the river of life and letting it flow through you. This is then the Alpha and the Omega pull that truly is the driving force behind all creation, where, as I said, even the Creator as the Alpha becomes more by seeing the Omega of its own creation unfold, and by allowing its own being to be embedded in that creation and thus unfolding with it. Yet we now need to take this to a deeper level. For you see, the purpose of creating a world of form is not simply that the Creator becomes more. This is the Alpha aspect of the purpose, but the Omega aspect is that you become more, or rather that all self-aware extensions of the Creator become more. And to that end, it is absolutely essential that each self-aware extension of the Creator's being is endowed with the ability to make choices, and is then given complete freedom to make any choices it wants and then experience the consequences of those choices. My beloved, in order to understand this principle, You need to be willing to step back and question one of the most fundamental beliefs that is promoted by many of the religions found on this planet. This is the belief that it is possible for human beings to make a mistake so grave that they are forever condemned to an eternity in a fiery hell or some other very undesirable place as defined by each individual religion. Nevertheless, most religions on this planet do contain the idea that whereas you have at least some freedom of will, there is some epic importance to the choices you make, and thus some choices will give you eternal life in some heaven world, whereas other choices will give you an eternity of punishment in some lower realm. Let me now endeavor to explain the reality behind these ideas. You are, as I have hinted as before, a God in the making, a creator in the making. You are designed to start out as a very localized extension of the Creator's being, who has a very limited sense of self-awareness. You are aware of yourself as an individual being that exists in a very localized environment. For example, you might be aware of yourself as one human being, as one physical body on this little planet called Earth. Surely there was a time when human beings thought the Earth was the center of the universe, and therefore being even a small human being on Earth was still important in God's plan. But given that you today have the knowledge of the immensity of the universe, you can see that truly being a human being on this planet is a very localized sense of self-awareness. Yet even so, you have the potential to grow in self-awareness. And this is indeed the process that has been demonstrated by the Buddha, by Jesus, and by other spiritual beings who are today ascended and comprise the spiritual teachers of humankind. And even beyond that of the immediate state of ascending from the earth, there is an ongoingness to the expansion of your self-awareness that can take you up not only from the sphere in which you currently live, but through the other spheres beyond it, until you have actually reached the very level of self-awareness of the Creator from which you came. This means that instead of there just being one Creator, there will now be two Creators, two beings, two individual beings with the self-awareness of a Creator, and thus capable of creating their own universes. And this, of course, can be repeated indefinitely, and is being repeated indefinitely in the existence of an unfathomable number of universes, worlds without end, way beyond what most human beings are able to fathom with their current linear state of consciousness. Thus, let me just hint at this reality rather than going into it in any great depth, so as not to overwhelm your mind at this early stage of the book. Yet what you need to take away from this discussion is indeed that the greater purpose behind the creation of the world of form is the growth in self-awareness, where you start out with a very localized sense of self and gradually expand that self until you reach the level of the Creator. Now, what exactly does this mean? How can you complete this process of the expansion of self-awareness? Well, can you see that the Creator that started the very world of form in which you live is beyond its own creation? The Creator is more than the creation, is more than anything in the world of form. And thus, in order for you to reach the level of self-awareness of the Creator, you need to continue to transcend your current self-awareness until you reach the ultimate level. That means you can never allow yourself to stop at any point. You can never allow yourself to identify yourself with anything in the world of form. You can never allow yourself to identify yourself as a being who has reached some kind of ultimate state from which you cannot transcend yourself. This, my beloved, is the reality, the deeper reality behind the second law of thermodynamics. For you see, in this world of form, The underlying principle is self-transcendence, but the omega aspect of that principle is self-transcendence through free will. Thus, we might say that everything in this world of form, when it comes to the form aspect of it, is subject to free will. This means that in the material universe, which, as I have explained, is part of a sphere that is not yet ascended, every aspect of this universe is subject to the free will of the beings who inhabit it. As I have said, the earth was created by the Elohim in a very high state of purity because the Elohim are one with the river of life. Yet since then, the beings who live inside the system of the earth have used their free will to enter a lower state of consciousness, and thus they have actually been allowed to outpicture a lower state of balance, harmony, beauty, and abundance than what was originally envisioned and manifest by the Elohim. Yet while free will is the ultimate law, free will does not exist alone. Free will itself is not a closed system, for free will exists within the larger principle of self-transcendence. And thus, if you look at planet Earth today and realize that many of the limitations you find on Earth today are the products of the state of consciousness of humankind, well then you might ask yourself a question. Once a group of beings living on a planet have created a lower state than was originally envisioned by the Elohim, how can these beings escape that state? Just for a moment, think about yourself and how, as you grew up on this planet, you have come to take certain things for granted without even thinking about questioning them. Consider how you have been brought up to believe that there are many aspects of life on earth that are the products of the laws of nature, and that these laws are immutable and invariable, meaning that you as an individual, or even humankind as a whole, has no power over them whatsoever. This has many ramifications. For example, you might believe that there are limits to how many people can live on planet Earth, that there are limits to how much food can be produced on the Earth, and therefore the fact that there are many people today who are living near the starvation level is caused by there being too many people on Earth. Or you might even have been brought up to accept that because of a principle called survival of the fittest, there is a law of nature which mandates that some people form an elite who have special privileges beyond the ordinary population. If you go back in time, you will see that during the Middle Ages, there were societies called the feudal societies in which the vast majority of the population were the virtual slaves of a small noble class. What kept this society alive for centuries was that the noble class, the elite, had managed to prevent the population from being educated to the point where they could even envision a different society. Thus, do you see my point? Everything is subject to the free will of human beings. Many conditions on earth are subject to the free will of human beings. Yet human beings exercise their free will according to their vision. And so once human beings have entered into a certain state of consciousness that gives them a limited vision, how will they ever rise beyond that state of consciousness? If there was no mechanism that would work against the status quo, well then people could remain trapped at a certain level of self-awareness for an indefinite period of time. Can you see that this is not in accordance with the overall purpose of the universe, namely the growth in self-awareness? Free will mandates that you have a right to enter into any state of consciousness you like. But the law of free will also states that you do not have a right to remain in that consciousness for an indefinite period of time. You can remain in a state of consciousness for a long time, as measured with earth time, but you cannot remain in it indefinitely or forever, for then you would not be able to self-transcend and reach the ultimate goal for this universe. What is the mechanism that makes it impossible for self-aware beings to remain in the same state of consciousness for an indefinite period of time? Well, it is the mechanism behind the second law of thermodynamics, which simply says that the moment you lock yourself at a certain level of consciousness, at that moment your environment will become subject to the second law of thermodynamics that seeks to return everything to the lowest possible energy state, which means that everything in your environment will start breaking down until you once again open your mind and become willing to transcend your state of consciousness. So, do you see that the spiritual meaning behind the second law of thermodynamics is that the very definition of a closed system is a being or a group of beings who are refusing to use their free will to transcend their current level of consciousness? Thus, these beings are no longer flowing with the river of life, because they have created a closed system in their minds. Do you see that the only system that can be somewhat closed is, in fact, the mind of a being with free will? Because that being has the right to temporarily set itself apart from the river of life. Yet, in order to prevent that being from becoming permanently trapped in that sense of separation, the river of life will make sure that when a being sets itself apart, everything it co-creates can only break down. This is indeed why you see a tendency that closed societies will create so many problems that they eventually end up breaking down the entire civilization. Cast a quick glance back at the history of humankind as it is currently known, and you will see many civilizations that rose sometimes to great levels of sophistication and organization, only then to stagnate. And as soon as they stagnated, the downward slide began, and it is amazing how quickly this could result in the total collapse of a sophisticated civilization that actually thought it would endure forever. Do you not see that the current environmental problems experienced by Western civilization are one example of this process? Precisely by becoming a closed system, by believing that human beings were separated from the nature around them. Western civilization started creating environmental problems that then started very quickly having effects on the civilization itself. Fortunately, some people were alert, and it has now been a growing awareness that Western civilization is not a closed system, and therefore it is necessary to understand how nature works in order to avoid destroying the civilization that has been built. Yet, what does this ultimately mean? Is it just a matter of discovering a few principles and then we can create a civilization that can last forever? Nay, my beloved, what I am telling you here is that for any civilization to be sustainable, that civilization must be in a constant process of self-transcendence. It is not possible to discover laws or principles, and once you know and apply those laws, you can remain at a certain state for an indefinite period of time. As I have now tried to explain to you, the very underlying principle behind the entire world of form is self-transcendence. And thus, only when you are in alignment with that fundamental law will you, as an individual or an entire civilization, be sustainable. Sustainability means constant self-transcendence. If you attempt to attain sustainability by maintaining a certain state, then the second law of thermodynamics will break down that state until you end up having nothing left. This is not some angry and judgmental God who is seeking to punish you. This is a loving God who wants you to attain the fullness of God's kingdom, which means God's self-awareness, God's state of consciousness. In order to make sure that you do not use your free will to settle for less, God has set up a law that will make it impossible for you to be permanently trapped in a lesser state of self-awareness. This then is what the Elohim know. They are one with the self-transcendence of the river of life. And they designed a planet based on that principle, so that the very planet itself is designed to give humankind the best possible platform, not for remaining in some Edenic state for an indefinite period of time, but for remaining in the true paradise of constant self-transcendence. As long as humankind was willing to transcend, as I said happened in the first civilizations, then the earth was continually transcending itself. But when that desire and drive for self-transcendence was lost, and humankind became obsessed by the desire to attain permanence in the material world, then the second law of thermodynamics immediately began to break things down and manifest the many forms of imbalances you currently see on planet Earth. This then is an idea that I am well aware will be in contradiction to almost everything you were brought up to believe. Whether you had an upbringing that was dominated by a particular religion or no religion, or even the materialistic religion, there is hardly any philosophy on earth today that truly understands and incorporates this principle. And thus, I am aware that it might require some adjustment on your part before you are able to truly lock into what I have explained to you. So I will talk in the coming keys about more concrete aspects of how the Elohim used the 7 spiritual rays to design planet Earth, so that you may come to a gradual understanding of the qualities and the perversions that make up planet Earth. And then I will later come back to this principle of self-transcendence, this principle of the river of life, of the unconditional love that causes all life to flow. And we will see if we cannot then attain a higher understanding of exactly why this principle is so important for those who are willing to be the forerunners for healing Mother Earth.